Saturday, February 16th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So today I want to talk about how difficult it is to challenge our current fiat money system. And I want to look at three incidents where, in my opinion, this, was an example of how the powers that be, the people who control the central banks, some people think it's like 13 families out there who control the central banks, the major central banks of the world, like the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the ECB, and so on. I just want to show you how I think these people are ruthless, and give you a few examples that you might think have nothing in common, but after years of reading a lot of stuff and listening to videos, I've kind of put two and two together, and I've come to the conclusion that they might, it's all to do with the control, and how people like the Hunt brothers, Hugo Chavez, and even the Shah of Iran might, have something in common. And before I go on to the my thesis or theory on this, I'll just give you some sources from where I got this information, so you can look at it yourself and try to, see what you think. Do your own research. Don't take me for granted. This is just my opinion, but it hopefully will open your interest into looking into this subject. So the first source that I have is from Lindsay Williams, and it's from back in 1986, and he did a presentation about someone called Jonathan May. And Jonathan May was an English businessman who was involved with Arab countries, with the Hunt brothers, supposedly, according to Jonathan May, in trying to start like a new monetary system based on silver in the late 70s, early 80s. And so that's the first source. I'll put the link to it's a 7-part video in the description, also up in the cards. The other source as well, and this source is very, very how can I say, there's loads of information. It's called silverstealers.net. It's a website kept by Charles Savoy. He used to write for silver-investor.com. His stuff is not there anymore, but you'll find it on his website. He's written extensively about silver, and I've done a lot of reading on the silver matter, on the silver market and the history. So I want to start with the Hunt brothers, because, back in 1980, what we're told briefly is that they tried to corner the silver market, and then the regulators got involved and changed the rules on COMEX and bankrupted them. That's the short story about it. But I think we need to go to look back into the Hunt brothers and who they really are. They were, their father was H.L. Hunt. And I got a story here from the New York Times back in 1964, the year I was born. And it says, H.L. Hunt turned a $50 loan into an oil empire. Texan 75 commands a big family business domain. Millionaire is also occupied with right-wing causes. H.L. Hunt knew how to turn a $50 loan into vast oil domain. So, and it goes on to say here, an authoritative source says Mr. Hunt personally is less wealthy than his 6 children, of whom has a trust fund and operates in his own right. This source estimates the family fortune at 700 million or more. He figures the family might produce 13 to 15 million barrels of oil a year, with sales from all businesses exceeding 600 million a year. So they were immensely wealthy, this family. The other story about the Hunts that I want to talk about, it's from the monetary future blogspot.com. And it reads, Hunt brothers demanded physical delivery too. So that, most people probably, think the Hunt brothers just trying to, buy silver futures, make money and get out. But no, because the Hunt brothers, we have to remember that they were earning a lot of money through their oil. And I think they had oil interests all over the world. I think even in Kuwait, they were huge. And we know what happened in 1971. We know that, the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. government, President Nixon, suspended the convertibility of the dollar or the Federal Reserve note into gold. Temporarily, it was August 15th, 1971. So here you have this immensely wealthy family, earning a lot of dollars. It's highly possible that they were concerned, with the loss of purchasing power of their fortune. The other thing I wanted to touch upon is some people don't realize how bad things were in the 70s. So I've got here The Death of Money by Jim Rickards. And in the introduction, he talks about that period of time. So I'll read a little bit here from the introduction. And Jim Rickards says, few Americans in our time recall that the dollar nearly ceased to function as the world's reserve currency in 1978. So can you imagine, you have billions and billions of revenue or millions of revenue a year, multi-billion dollar fortune, and the currency, of your country is almost going bust. Do you really want to hold on to that paper? That year, the Federal Reserve Dollar Index declined to a distressingly low level, and the U.S. Treasury was forced to issue government bonds denominated in Swiss francs. Foreign creditors no longer trusted the U.S. dollar as a store of value. The dollar was losing purchasing power, dropping by half from 1977 to 1981. U.S. inflation was over 50% during those 5 years. Starting in 1979, the IMF had little choice but to mobilize its resources to issue world money, or SDRs. And it goes on to say, we would do well to recall those dark days. The price of gold rose 500% from 1977 to 1980. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the Hunt brothers, I think their dad died in 1974, but they had an interest in maintaining the purchasing power, their wealth. And I think buying silver, physical silver, was one of them. And why silver? Why not gold? Well, they started buying silver in 1973. Futures and taking delivery. Back then, you couldn't buy gold; it was illegal. So they had to go with the silver. So I'll read from this the Money Future blogspot. It says, beginning in 1973 and continuing to 1974. They, the Hunt brothers, slowly began purchasing silver futures contracts totaling 55 million ounces, and then took physical delivery of all the contracts. Since Bunker was concerned with impending inflation and the potential confiscation of precious metals following Nixon's closing of the gold window, he arranged for transfer of the bullion to Switzerland. I'll read here, continue to read. By the spring of 1974, the market started to get worried about the amount of silver out in private hands because annual demand was 450 million ounces, but annual production was just 245 million ounces. Of the estimated 7 million ounces above ground, only 200 million of that was deliverable against futures contracts. Silver had risen to above $6 per ounce during this time and then settled back to $3 to the $3 to $4 range for several years. So it goes on to talk about how the Hunt brothers later on got involved with some, Arabs, and John Connolly. That's the other interesting story. John Connolly, who was a former governor of Texas, the guy who was in the limo with JFK when JFK got shot, was assassinated. So it says here, then in 1978, a significant development occurred. John Connolly, former governor of Texas, introduced Bunker Hunt to a Saudi sheikh at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington. Sheikh Khalid bin Mahfouz was staying at the same hotel as Bunker and John Connolly, and they met in bin Mahfouz's suite, which consisted of the entire hotel floor. So basically what happened, they got together and they they formed another company, offshore company, to start buying silver. Apparently Bunker Hunt spent a long time explaining to the Arab sheikh what was going on, explaining to him about inflation and how the dollar was losing value. So that's what happened. So Jonathan May also says that the Shah of Iran got involved with the Hunt brothers. I'm not sure I don't have proof of that, but I wouldn't put it past the Shah of Iran to have gotten involved. I wanted to also play a video of the Shah of Iran. He did an interview with the BBC back in 1974, January 1974. And very interesting interview. At the time, the price of oil was going up. Britain was in a bad recession. There was a lot of inflation. And I just want to play a few clips here of this video so you can see, the mindset of the Shah of Iran. So there's the BBC guy who's going to ask questions. So I'll start here at 47 seconds.
The increasing price of oil is going to hit our balance of payments hard and maybe even cause our economy to stop growing altogether for a year or two. Is this really what you want?
Just the opposite. That's why what we have decided and the consequent decisions will alleviate, for a very good part, your balance of payments. And I know that we might eventually do other kind of deal of that sort with other oil-producing countries. But don't forget that in 3 years' time, you will be a big oil producer yourselves. You might be a member of our club.
So that's quite interesting, and he was right, because in the early 80s, Britain recovered really well and became, the North Sea oil. So, and then I want to play a bit further up at 2 minutes. It's quite interesting as well.
But may I put it this way? Many people watching you tonight, watching you talking to us now, many people in Britain, some of them cold, some of them quite poor, will be asking themselves what it is that you and certainly some of your Arab counterparts, sheikhs and rulers and governments, have against them. Does it in any way serve your interests to make a British economy suffer?
Why against? First of all, it's not British economy. If you want to say anything, it should be the world economy. And this is not against, we're just defending our chips. Because for such a long time we have just been, exploited, I can't say that. And why don't you say that when the price of wheat was augmented by 300%, they had something against us? We had to buy it, or soybean, or steel products, or petrochemical products, which in some cases have augmented by 30 times. So did you have anything against us when you augmented those prices?
So there you go. He wasn't a stupid guy. the reporter from the BBC saying, "Oh, have you got anything against us?" And he's saying, "No, you know, prices are going up. We're having to pay more for food and grains." And then I want to play another part of this, and it's really interesting. It's at 3 minutes 20. And this is the Shah of Iran.
Is not what you were charging 2 months ago. It's increasing. Have you something against us?
Have you anything in principle against the system in Britain and other Western countries?
Not really against, but I must tell you my opinion. If you continue this way, a permissive, undisciplined society, you are going to blow up. And in matter of fact...
How do we blow up? I'm not quite clear what you mean by that.
Well, you will go bankrupt.
Well, there you go. This was in 1974, and 2 years later, 1976 IMF crisis. The 1976 IMF crisis was a financial crisis in the United Kingdom, which forced James Callaghan's Labour Party government to borrow 3.9 billion or 17.2 billion in 2018 dollars from the IMF, the largest loan ever to have been requested from the IMF. So the Shah of Iran was saying, you know, Britain is spending too much, borrowing too much, you know, you're not producing enough, you're going to blow up. And lo and behold, he was right. It isn't out of the realms of possibility that the Shah of Iran got involved in trying to protect the interest of Iran by buying silver. I recommend the Lindsey Williams video. Jonathan May talks about how they were actually trying to form a new currency backed by silver. And that Texas wanted, you know, Nelson, the Hunt brothers, together with John Connolly and other Texans, wanted to have Texas have its own silver currency. And he noted as well, Jonathan May, that Texas is the only state that became a state through a treaty, and that treaty has to be approved every year, or, you know, ratified every year. I know it's automatic now, but, you know, there was, he was implying that Texas wanted to become independent. So when you look at these things and you look at what happened to the Hunt brothers, how the Federal Reserve, Paul Volcker at the time, the CBOT, they all conspired to really kill you know, the silver market. And what I'm trying to say as well, it wasn't like the Hunt brothers got involved, you know, just to squeeze the market to make as much money as possible. I think it was more than that. It was more trying to protect their wealth. But you can read here in the Monetary Future blog spot on this article that I'll put in the link. Hunt brothers demanded physical delivery to how the COMEX, the U.S. Treasury, the Fed, they basically, you know, in January of 1980, when silver was hitting $50, they just changed the game. You couldn't buy silver futures anymore, and you could only sell. So the market collapsed, and you know, the article goes on to talk about the fact that this concentration of longs is a no-no for the regulators. It's a no-no for the central banks. But we've had years now of a concentration of shorts, the bullion banks, but it's okay for them because, you know, the central banks and the bullion banks and the powers that be, what they don't like is the rising precious metals prices. So what about Hugo Chavez? Well, Hugo Chavez was not involved in that silver squeeze, or, you know, in the 70s and 80s. But more importantly, in 2011, he repatriated 85% of Venezuela's bullion reserves. Nowadays, we're talking about, the 17 tons or so that they have at the Bank of England. But many people don't realize that back in, I think it started probably in 2010, Venezuela said, we want our gold back from the Bank of England. And by November 2011, Venezuela got 160 tons of its gold from the Bank of England, and it was shipped to Caracas. The interesting thing about this is that if you look at the chart of gold in end of 2010, 2011, that's when we had the massive move up to over $1,900. And that was just not many people talk about that. And I think there's quite a bit there. It has a lot to do with the fact that Venezuela actually had the temerity to ask for its physical gold from the Bank of England. And 160 tons doesn't sound that much, but when we know that the LBMA and the COMEX are leveraged hundreds of times, with paper, it doesn't take that much of actual physical gold to maybe squeeze the market higher. And that's probably why the Bank of England discourages people. Look at Australia. We've had some videos recently about how Australia will not bring back its physical gold from the Bank of England. Well, Australia, the Australian authorities, the central bankers in Australia, the government officials, they know what happens, when you try to mess with these people. And what happened to Hugo Chavez? Well, he died less than 2 years later, and on the Wikipedia here for Hugo Chavez, it says here, Maduro alleged that Chavez was poisoned or infected with a cancer virus by the U.S. government. A spokesman for the U.S. State Department dismissed the claim as absurd. Venezuela got its gold by the end of 2011, and Chavez, let's see, he was dead on March 5th, 2013, at age 58. The Shah of Iran, look what happened to, the silver market and the dollar, almost losing its reserve currency status. That was happening in 1978. When did the Iranian Revolution, which happened 40 years ago, was 1979. And then the Shah of Iran was deposed. The Shah of Iran was really, he was part of the globalists. He was, he played ball, but then he started looking after the interests of Iran, and look what happened. The Iranian hostage crisis, he was deposed, and then he died, I think, 1981 or so, and he was 60 as well. So, of course, I've got no proof, but it's highly suspect, isn't it? So there you go. Well, it's not three people, but you've got Hugo Chavez, you got the Hunt brothers, Nelson and Bunker Hunt, and you got the Shah of Iran. It seems to me, I don't even think they were trying to challenge the dollar or the fiat money system. They're just trying to protect their interests against a system that was almost dying. Globalists, the central bankers, they fought, they won. So that's why it's probably, a lot of people sometimes talk about the gold and silver market. Why doesn't a really rich individual or a big hedge fund come in and buy billions in physical? Well, because I think a lot of people know what would happen if you try to take a lot of physical gold or silver from the COMEX or from the LBMA. You'd be in trouble, and you just have to look at the history. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little longer, but it is the weekend, and it's something a little different. I highly recommend you watch the Lindsay Williams Syndrome of Control video. It's really interesting. I'll put the link to the story on the Hunt Brothers. Hunt Brothers demanded physical delivery too, and I'll put the link to the story about when Venezuela repatriated 160 tons in 2011. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Also, if you are not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also hit the notification button. I make videos every day, so if YouTube doesn't notify you, go to my channel and click on videos and you'll see my new video. You can also follow me on Steam, at DTube, and on Twitter. I wish you all a great weekend, and I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.